She crashed my baby shower after lying about crack at my gender reveal, and my family did nothing. She showed up smiling at my gender reveal and told people someone was smoking crack there. At my baby shower. At the party I threw to celebrate the life growing inside me. And then my own family looked me in the eye and said she was just upset because she cannot have kids, like that somehow explained everything away and made it all okay. Let me take you back to the beginning so you understand just how deep this situation actually goes. Our narrator today is a 25-year-old woman who has spent years dealing with a sister who has made her life genuinely difficult. The sister, 28, has a documented history of being verbally and emotionally abusive. This is not a one-time bad day. This is not a sister who slips up occasionally and says the wrong thing. This is a pattern of behavior that has gone unchecked for a long time, a slow accumulation of incidents and outbursts and cutting remarks that the family absorbed and normalized over the years because the sister had something going on, always something, always a reason, always a context that made her the one who deserved softness while the people she hurt deserved patience. This is what happens when cruelty gets a diagnosis attached to it. It stops looking like cruelty. It starts looking like a symptom. And everyone around it starts acting like a caregiver instead of a witness. And that is the foundation of this entire story. Because when you grow up in a family that consistently excuses one person's cruelty, you start to understand that accountability is not something that family values. You learn that no matter what that person does, there will always be a reason it was not their fault, always someone else to blame, always a way to reframe the damage so that the person who got hurt ends up being the one who has to just get over it. You learn to shrink. You learn to preemptively manage your own reactions because you already know that when the dust settles, the family will be looking at you, waiting to see if you are going to make this harder than it needs to be. That is the environment our narrator grew up in, and it is the environment she is still trying to navigate now that she is building her own family. The gender reveal was the final straw. Our narrator threw a beautiful celebration for her pregnancy. 70+ people showed up, close family and close friends, people who came dressed and excited and ready to find out whether she was having a boy or a girl. You can picture the yard, the decorations, the little clusters of people holding plates and laughing. The kind of afternoon that is supposed to be one of those warm, uncomplicated memories. And right there in the middle of it, with all those people present and all that joy in the air, her sister decided to start claiming that someone at the party was smoking crack and weed. Not a quiet word in someone's ear. Not a whispered concern. An actual claim, said out loud, at a pregnancy celebration, in front of guests who had come to celebrate new life. The kind of accusation that lands like a stone in still water, sending ripples of confusion and discomfort through every person who heard it. And when the dust settled and the day ended and the family gathered to process what had happened, the response was not to hold the sister accountable. It was to explain that she was acting out because she cannot have biological children and was upset that her younger sister got pregnant before her. That was the explanation. That was the defense. Let me be absolutely clear about what that means. The family chose, consciously and deliberately, to center the feelings of the person who caused harm rather than the person who experienced it. They decided that the sister's grief about her fertility was a legitimate reason to tolerate her making up stories about drug use at a pregnancy party. They asked our narrator to hold the memory of that afternoon, the confusion on people's faces, the way the atmosphere shifted, the low hum of damage that followed her into every conversation afterward, and simply absorb it as the cost of having a complicated sister. And the kicker, the part that really lands hard, is that zero apology ever came. Not a private message, not a quiet acknowledgement, not even the bare minimum of a text that said, "Hey, I know that was not okay." The sister did not apologize, and the family did not push her to. So our narrator made a decision. Zero contact. Done. That right there is a completely reasonable response to years of this kind of treatment. When someone repeatedly hurts you, refuses to take accountability, and is actively shielded by the people around them, removing yourself from that situation is not dramatic. It is self-protection. It is sanity. And it is exactly what any therapist, any counselor, any person with clear eyes would tell you to do when every attempt to set a boundary results in the family rallying around the person crossing it. So now we are in the present. Our narrator and her husband are throwing their own baby shower. They planned it themselves over the course of about a month and a half, with help from her sister-in-law. They sat together and made lists, they argued pleasantly over food and decorations, they sent out invites and tracked RSVPs and did all the quiet administrative labor that goes into making a celebration feel considered and intentional. The sister was not on the list, because of course she was not. The decision made perfect sense given everything that happened. But here is where the story gets complicated and a little bit tense, because the venue they chose is the grandmother's backyard. Now, the grandmother offering her backyard was genuinely generous. They took on all the work themselves, which is an enormous undertaking for a big Latin party with a large guest list. They arranged the setup, the food, the games, the cleanup. They sourced everything, coordinated the timing, figured out the logistics of feeding and entertaining a crowd in someone else's space. They even hired someone the weekend before to go out and mow, weed, and trim the trees in the yard to make sure everything would look beautiful and welcoming. They were treating this borrowed space with more care and attention than most people give to their own property. This couple put real effort and real money into making this event happen, and they did all of it at a venue they do not own, in a yard that belongs to someone who is apparently willing to invite whoever she wants regardless of what she agreed to. Because here is what happened when they went over to the grandparents' house during the holiday to finalize the lawn service details. They arrived expecting a quick, ordinary visit. Maybe a cup of coffee, maybe a few minutes going over what needed to be done before Saturday. And instead they walked in and there was the sister. And her husband. Both of them, just there, in the living room or the kitchen or wherever families gather when they stop by, present in a way that felt less like coincidence and more like arrangement. Now in any normal situation that might be a coincidence. Families overlap, people drop by, holidays create those accidental convergences. But this is not a normal situation. And the behavior was the tell. The sister and her husband were suddenly warm. Suddenly friendly. Smiling. The kind of ease that does not fit the history at all, like watching two people perform a version of themselves they had rehearsed but never quite perfected. Her husband, who was at the gender reveal and who knows exactly what went down, congratulated her on the pregnancy. After everything. After the crack accusation and the zero contact and the months of silence, after all of it, suddenly he is standing there with a smile on his face offering congratulations like none of it ever happened. Both our narrator and her husband clocked it immediately. Something was off. The air in that room had a particular quality to it, the kind of tension that hides underneath performed normalcy. People do not just flip a switch and become friendly after that kind of history without a reason. And the most obvious reason, the one that fits every single piece of evidence, is that the grandmother had already told the sister she was invited to the shower. Because if you had just been told you were getting to attend your estranged pregnant sister's baby shower, you might suddenly be in a much better mood. You might feel a small, private victory settling somewhere in your chest. You might even be nice enough to congratulate her on the pregnancy you have been ignoring for months, because why not, you have already won the thing you wanted. I am not saying I would have kept it together in that driveway. I genuinely do not know that I would have. So now the couple is in this impossible spot. They suspect the grandmother went behind their backs and invited the sister. But they have no proof. No text message, no screenshot, no confirmation, nothing concrete to hold up and point to. And this is where the husband and the narrator start to see the situation differently, the way two people who love each other can look at the same set of facts and arrive at different places. The husband wants to confront the grandmother directly, maybe even give her an ultimatum, because they have invested serious money and serious effort into this party and he does not want a repeat of what happened at the gender reveal. He has watched his wife absorb this family's decisions for long enough. He is done watching her calibrate herself around people who refuse to do the same for her. That is completely understandable. If someone might be about to blow up your carefully planned celebration for the second time, you want to know about it before it happens, before you are standing in the middle of a party watching the day unravel in real time. But our narrator is hesitant. She feels uncomfortable confronting without solid proof. She does not want to cause drama that might turn out to be based on nothing, especially with her grandparents, people she loves, and does not want to damage her relationship with unnecessarily. There is a particular kind of exhaustion in being the person who always has to decide how much to push back. You start running the math automatically, calculating what a confrontation will cost versus what silence will cost, and neither answer ever feels clean. And so her plan is to wait. Show up Saturday. If the sister appears, she will ignore her and focus on enjoying her day. And afterward, she will have the conversation with her grandmother, set harder boundaries, and if those are not respected, go low contact. What makes this plan compelling and also a little heartbreaking is the exhaustion embedded in it. This is a woman who is weeks away from giving birth. She is carrying a baby, and she is carrying all of this at the same time, the anticipation and the joy, and underneath it this dull, grinding awareness that the people who are supposed to make her feel safe keep choosing not to. She has set boundaries that were ignored. She has gone zero contact. She has tried to protect herself and her family. And now, on the week of her baby shower, she is sitting here trying to calculate the least amount of damage she can absorb while still having a day that is supposed to be joyful. That is not a fun place to be. That is not how anyone should be spending the week before their baby shower. She is right that confronting without proof is risky and could create a fight that poisons the atmosphere before the party even starts. And she is also right that if she waits and the sister shows up, at least she will have confirmation of exactly what the grandmother did and can respond from a place of fact rather than suspicion. There is a logic to waiting, even if it is uncomfortable. But here is the layer that I keep coming back to. The grandmother knows about the zero contact. She was explicitly told about what happened at the gender reveal. She was given a direct boundary about not including the sister in events or pushing for a relationship. That boundary was communicated clearly, not hinted at, not implied, said out loud and understood. So if she went ahead and invited the sister anyway, that is not a misunderstanding. That is not a grandmother who forgot or got confused or thought enough time had passed. That is a deliberate choice made by someone who decided that her preference for family harmony, or her loyalty to the older sister, or her own discomfort with conflict, mattered more than the boundary her granddaughter set. And deliberate choices deserve real responses. Actually, you know what? The fact that the husband of the sister had the audacity to walk up and congratulate her after being at that gender reveal. After witnessing everything. That detail has been living rent-free in my head this whole time. The husband's instinct to confront sooner rather than later is not wrong either. There is something to be said for giving the grandmother a chance to course correct before Saturday rather than letting things explode publicly in the middle of the party. Because if the sister does show up and it does turn into a scene, the party is affected regardless of how well our narrator handles it in the moment. The crowd will feel the tension, family members will take sides, and a day that was supposed to be about celebrating a new life will become about managing a family conflict that should have been handled weeks ago. Here is my verdict, and I mean every word of this. Our narrator is not the asshole in any version of this story. She has done everything right. She set boundaries, she communicated clearly, she removed herself from an abusive dynamic, and she is still being put in position after position where she has to make the hard call while everyone around her refuses to do the same. Her plan to wait and observe is not cowardice. It is measured and self-protective and completely reasonable given the lack of concrete evidence. But let me say this directly. If the sister shows up on Saturday, the conversation with the grandmother needs to happen immediately afterward, and it needs to be honest, firm, and not softened by politeness. The grandmother made a choice, and choices have consequences. Low contact is a reasonable and proportionate response to someone who says they respect your boundaries and then quietly invites the exact person you asked not to be there to your own baby shower. And as for the sister, she has never apologized. Not once. No accountability, no acknowledgement, nothing. She got to make up stories about drug use at a pregnancy celebration and face zero consequences because her family decided her pain was more important than the damage she caused. That cycle only breaks when someone refuses to keep absorbing it. And our narrator has already made that call. She went zero contact for a reason. Saturday will tell her everything she needs to know about who her grandmother really is when it comes down to it. My roommate let my boyfriend come over, then lost her mind when he actually showed up. 9:53 p.m. She finally got her roommate to approve the boyfriend. She jumped through every hoop, made the introduction happen, got the green light. And the moment he actually walked through the door, her roommate packed a bag and left the house. Some situations reveal people for exactly who they are the moment a real test shows up. This story is about a woman who did everything she was asked to do, followed every rule, respected every condition, and still ended up standing in her own living room being told she owed someone an apology for having a guest over. Let us walk through this from the beginning because the details here matter a lot. Our narrator rents a room. She has a roommate. And at some point the roommate made it clear that she wanted to meet the boyfriend before he could come over. Now, that kind of arrangement is not unusual in shared living situations, and our narrator was reasonable about it. She did not push back or make it a fight. She set up the meeting, coordinated the timing, and made sure it actually happened rather than letting it linger as an unresolved condition hanging over her home life. She texted the roommate to come outside, made the introduction, let them talk for a bit, and the roommate went back inside. The next morning she even asked what the first impressions were, and the roommate said he seemed like a pretty decent guy. Green light given. Permission granted. Boyfriend cleared to visit. She had done exactly what was asked of her, jumped through a hoop that most people would have found at least slightly patronizing, and she had done it without complaint. What happens next is where things start to get genuinely strange. Our narrator tells her roommate ahead of time that the boyfriend is coming over. Not just a last-minute text, she mentions it the day before and multiple times throughout the week. She is not hiding anything. She is not being secretive. She is being transparent, probably more transparent than most people would bother being in their own home, and there is something worth noting about that level of consideration. She went out of her way to keep the roommate informed because she wanted the evening to feel comfortable for everyone, not just herself. The plan is completely low-key, just cooking and hanging out after a long work week. Nothing loud, nothing disruptive, nothing that would require anyone else in the house to change their plans or share any space they did not want to share. Just two tired people wanting to spend a quiet evening together in a place where one of them pays rent. Here is where I want to pause because this part matters. The roommate kept asking what their plans were. Over and over. What are you guys going to do? What are your plans for the night? And our narrator answered every single time with some version of absolutely nothing. We are just exhausted and want to chill. That is a full and complete answer. There is nothing suspicious about it, nothing that should have raised any flags. Nothing that warranted a follow-up question, let alone multiple follow-up questions. And yet the questions kept coming, which in hindsight starts to feel less like friendly curiosity and more like something else was going on under the surface. Like someone who already had a feeling they were not going to like the outcome and was waiting to catch something they could point to later. The evening arrives. The boyfriend comes over. And immediately the vibe is off. The roommate is being passive-aggressive. Sighing in that particular way that is loud enough to be noticed but quiet enough to deny if called out. Our narrator clocks it but decides not to make it into a confrontation, because the roommate had not been feeling well that day and sometimes people are just having a bad time and carrying it around with them. That is a mature and generous interpretation. It is the kind of grace you extend to someone you live with because you understand that moods are not always about you and you do not want to turn a minor tension into a whole evening of conflict. She gave her the benefit of the doubt, which was probably more than the situation deserved. Then the roommate finishes what she is doing, actively does not say hello despite the narrator being right there, and walks straight to her room. Then she leaves the house entirely. And then the message arrives. Okay, I need everyone to take a breath here because this message is something else entirely. The roommate's message says our narrator should have given her a heads up that the boyfriend was coming. After being told the day before. After being told multiple times throughout the week. She says she left because she felt uncomfortable and disrespected because she was not asked. And then, the part that escalates this from roommate drama into something much weirder, she brings up cameras. She says her boyfriend is going to see on the cameras that the visitor was there and that our narrator better have a good excuse ready. She also says her own boyfriend might be coming home sooner due to medical reasons and that when he does, everyone is going to sit down and have a big conversation about this. Let us just sit with that for a moment. The cameras. The good excuse. The boyfriend coming home to hold court over a conversation about a woman having a guest in her own rented living space. That is not a roommate concern. That is a control dynamic dressed up as a household policy. And the fact that it was delivered over text, after the roommate had already removed herself from the situation rather than simply talking like an adult, says a great deal about what kind of conflict resolution this person is actually interested in. The thing that is so frustrating about situations like this is how quickly the person being controlled can start to feel like they did something wrong. Because the message is framed as a boundary violation, as something deeply disrespectful, as something that requires explanation and negotiation and an eventual meeting presided over by someone who was not even in the building. And if you are not paying close attention, that framing can make you second-guess something that was completely normal and completely within your rights. The language of being disrespected is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that message, weaponizing the vocabulary of reasonable boundaries to describe a situation that had no actual harm in it anywhere. But let us be specific about what actually happened here. Our narrator was given permission for the boyfriend to come over. She gave advance notice. The roommate knew he was coming. The evening was quiet and low-key. No parties, no strangers, no noise, no mess, nothing that inconvenienced anyone or disrupted the household in any meaningful way. And the roommate still left the house and sent a message implying that our narrator needs to justify herself to the roommate's boyfriend when he gets back. That is not a reasonable roommate request. That is someone who wants to control who comes in and out of a shared living space in a way that goes far beyond what any renter should have to deal with. What really stands out is the camera comment. Because the implication is that the roommate's boyfriend, who does not even currently live there due to medical reasons, has some kind of authority over the situation. That he will review the footage. That he will weigh in. That his opinion on who was inside the house matters more than the actual tenant's right to have a guest over. Imagine receiving that message after a quiet evening of cooking dinner and doing absolutely nothing wrong. Imagine reading those words and realizing that somewhere in your home there is footage being monitored by someone who is not your landlord, and that footage is apparently going to be used as evidence in a tribunal you never agreed to participate in. That is genuinely alarming language to receive from someone you share a home with, and it suggests that the dynamic in this living situation is more complicated and more uncomfortable than just one passive-aggressive evening. Our narrator says she plans to move out but needs to save up first. That is the reality of the situation, and it is a completely understandable one. Not everyone can just leave the moment something goes sideways. Life does not work that way and finances do not either. But the awareness that she needs to get out is correct and important, and every interaction she has described points in the same direction. She is not overreacting. She is not being dramatic. She is reading the room accurately, probably for the first time with total clarity. Here is where I land on this, and I am not being gentle about it. The roommate was wrong. Not a little wrong, not understandably wrong, just flat out wrong. She set a rule, the rule was followed, and then she invented a new rule after the fact and reframed compliance as disrespect. That is not a good faith roommate. That is someone who enjoys having authority over other people and will keep shifting the goalposts to maintain it. The camera situation and the implied judgment from an absent boyfriend are the clearest signals here. Healthy roommate relationships do not involve surveillance, accountability, or third-party tribunals over a guest visiting on a quiet weeknight. If our narrator did anything wrong in this story, I genuinely cannot find it. She jumped through the hoops she was given, she communicated ahead of time, she kept the evening calm and unremarkable, and she still ended up on the receiving end of a message that read more like a warning than a complaint. Move out as soon as you can, and do not waste a single second feeling guilty about this. You did not disrespect anyone. You lived in your own home like a person who pays rent has every right to do. The only thing you need to have a good excuse for is why you stayed as long as you did. Drop a comment below and let me know which story hit harder for you. And if you want more of this, a like and a subscribe would genuinely mean a lot.